The unlikely intruders. In a serene part of the world, where tall trees reached for the sky and a gentle breeze whispered through the leaves, there stood a quaint little house. This two-story dwelling was nestled deep within a lush forest, far removed from the hustle and bustle of city life. It was a home filled with warmth, laughter, and an air of tranquility that enveloped all who entered. The garden surrounding it was meticulously cared for, bursting with vibrant flowers and a small pond that shimmered under the sun, home to various aquatic creatures. As dusk began to settle over this idyllic scene, 5 figures lurked in the shadows just beyond the tree line. These were no ordinary criminals, they belonged to a low-level gang known as the Scavengers. Their reputation was not one of fear but rather one of incompetence. Despite their numerous blunders, they had somehow managed to survive in a cutthroat world filled with more dangerous foes. However, on this particular evening, they were determined to change their fortunes by robbing what they believed was an unsuspecting human family. The leader of this motley crew was a creature named Gruck. He had a scruffy appearance, with scales that glimmered faintly in the fading light and eyes that darted nervously around him. Gruck had convinced his fellow gang members that this human dwelling would be an easy target. After all, anyone living so far from civilization must have something valuable hidden away. Beside him were his 4 comrades, Zarn, who was always eager for trouble, Jex, who had a penchant for overthinking, Lyra, who often questioned their plans, and finally, Bork, whose strength was matched only by his lack of intelligence. As they crouched behind bushes, Gruck whispered his plan. "Listen up. We'll wait until it's dark enough for them to be sleepy. Then we'll break in and take whatever we can find." His voice trembled with excitement and fear as he gestured towards the house. "Why don't we just knock?" Lyra suggested hesitantly, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "Knock? Are you mad? They'll just call for help." Gruck replied sharply. "We need to catch them off guard." With that settled in Gruck's mind, they crept forward on all fours, attempting to be stealthy despite their awkward movements. As they approached the door, a sense of unease washed over them. Something didn't feel right. Yet none dared to voice their concerns as they reached for the door handle. With a loud crash, Gruck kicked in the door instead of using stealth or finesse. Plasma weapons raised high, they stormed into what they expected would be chaos. Screams of terror and pleas for mercy echoed in their minds as they imagined themselves heroes of this heist. To their utter surprise, standing before them was not a terrified family but rather a plump woman dressed in a colorful sundress. She held an oven mitt on one hand and a tray of freshly baked cookies in another. Her expression shifted from surprise to delight as she exclaimed, "Oh! I was beginning to think you boys wouldn't come say hello. Would you like some cookies?" The gangsters froze in confusion at her cheerful demeanor amidst their threatening entrance. Give us all your valuables," barked Zarn, trying to sound menacing but failing miserably. The woman blinked slowly at them before lowering her tray slightly. "Why?" she asked innocently. "Because we have guns. We'll kill you if you don't give us what we want." Jex added nervously, feeling increasingly uncomfortable under her gaze. She tilted her head slightly as if considering their words. "Oh dear. I thought those were just toys," she replied cheerfully before setting down her tray on a nearby table. At that moment, Gruck felt something shift within him, a sense of foreboding mixed with confusion washed over him as he glanced at his comrades. They were all equally perplexed by this unexpected turn of events. "I said no. We are not going to give you anything," she declared firmly. Before she could finish her sentence, plasma bolts erupted from Gruck's weapon, striking her down instantly. The scent of burnt flesh filled the room as she collapsed onto the floor, a mixture of shock and disbelief painted across her face as life slipped away from her. The gangsters erupted into cheers at what they believed was their victory. They began rummaging through drawers and cabinets looking for valuables when suddenly another figure appeared from upstairs, a tall man with an ethereal presence who seemed both young and ancient at once. "Ooh, cookies! "Bridget, you shouldn't have," he exclaimed casually as he stepped into view. The gangsters froze again, weapons raised toward him but unsure how to react now that another human had entered their chaotic scene. "Well," he continued nonchalantly while glancing around at his wife's lifeless body on the floor, "I suppose this is a robbery then? And I see you've already met my wife." As silence fell upon them like an oppressive weight, Gruck felt dread creeping into his heart. Perhaps this night wouldn't go as smoothly as he had planned after all. A surprising encounter. As the dust settled from the chaotic entrance of the gang, the atmosphere in the quaint little house shifted dramatically. The man, who had just emerged from the stairs, stood in stark contrast to the gangsters. His pale skin glowed softly in the dim light, and his eyes held an ancient wisdom that seemed to pierce through the very fabric of reality. He looked at the intruders with a mix of curiosity and mild annoyance, as if he were more disturbed by their lack of manners than by their weapons. "Now, I suppose this is a robbery?" he asked, his voice calm and steady, almost as if he were discussing the weather rather than addressing a group of armed criminals. Gruck, still reeling from the shock of his wife's sudden demise, felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "Why yeah. We're here for your valuables," he stammered, trying to regain some semblance of control over the situation. The gangsters shifted nervously, their bravado faltering under the weight of the man's gaze. "Valuables?" The man raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement playing on his lips. "You mean like cookies?" He gestured toward the tray that had been hastily abandoned on the table. "Cookies? No. We want money. Gems. Anything valuable." Zarn shouted, his voice cracking as he felt increasingly out of place. The man chuckled softly. "You really don't know what you're dealing with here, do you?" He took a step forward, his presence commanding yet oddly inviting. "My name is Victor, and I assure you that you've made a grave mistake." The gang exchanged glances, uncertainty creeping into their ranks. They had expected fear and panic from their victims, not this strange calmness. "What do you mean?" Jex asked hesitantly. Victor smiled knowingly. "You see, my wife and I are not just ordinary humans. We have abilities." He paused for effect, allowing his words to sink in. "Abilities that you wouldn't understand." Gruck felt a shiver run down his spine. "What kind of abilities?" he demanded, trying to sound tough despite his growing unease. "Let's just say," Victor continued, "that we have faced far worse than a bunch of bumbling thieves." With that declaration, he raised his hand slightly, and an ethereal glow began to emanate from his fingertips. The gangsters watched in horror as tendrils of light danced around Victor's hand. It was mesmerizing yet terrifying, they had never seen anything like it before. "What are you doing?" Lyra squeaked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just a little demonstration," Victor replied casually as he flicked his wrist. The tendrils shot out like lightning bolts toward Gruck and his gangmates. They instinctively raised their weapons to defend themselves but were met with an overwhelming force that knocked them off their feet. As they tumbled backward onto the floor, panic set in among them. "Get up! Get up!" Gruck shouted frantically as he scrambled to regain his footing. But it was too late, Victor was already advancing toward them with an air of authority. "You've invaded our home," Victor said firmly, "and now you must face the consequences." The room felt charged with energy as he continued to approach them slowly but deliberately. "What do we do?" Bork whimpered from where he lay sprawled on the floor. His muscles were tense with fear as he glanced around for an escape route. "Fight back!" Gruck yelled defiantly despite feeling an overwhelming sense of dread wash over him. He aimed his plasma weapon at Victor but found himself unable to pull the trigger. It felt as if an invisible force was holding him back. Victor stopped just a few feet away from them and raised an eyebrow at Gruck's weapon. "You think that will work on me? You're mistaken." With another flick of his wrist, Gruck's weapon flew from his hands and clattered harmlessly across the room. The gangsters exchanged terrified glances, they were completely outmatched. Jex's mind raced as he tried to formulate a plan while grappling with fear and confusion. "We can negotiate," he blurted out suddenly, desperation lacing his voice. "Negotiate?" Victor repeated with an amused smile. "What could you possibly offer me?" We could leave. Just let us go." Jex stammered, scrambling to find any semblance of reason in this chaotic situation. Victor considered this for a moment before shaking his head slowly. "I don't think so. You've already crossed a line by coming here uninvited." He paused again as if weighing options in his mind before adding, "But I'm willing to make it interesting." "What do you mean?" Gruck asked cautiously. "I'll give you one chance," Victor said with a sly grin. "If you can beat me in a game of wits, something simple, I'll let you leave unharmed." The gangsters blinked in disbelief at this unexpected turn of events. A game? They had come prepared for violence and chaos, not for some silly contest. Yet they were desperate enough to consider it. "What kind of game?" Zarn asked suspiciously. "A riddle," Victor replied cheerfully. "If you answer correctly, you can leave with your lives intact." Gruck felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Riddles were something they could handle, sort of. "Fine. What's your riddle?" Victor leaned closer and spoke clearly. "I speak without a mouth and hear without ears. I have no body but I come alive with wind. What am I?" The gang stared blankly at each other, confusion etched on their faces. They had been expecting something more straightforward, something they could easily answer, but this was different. Is it wind?" Lyra ventured hesitantly. "No." Victor laughed lightly at her guess before continuing to watch them squirm under pressure. Time ticked by agonizingly slowly as they struggled to come up with an answer while Victor stood patiently before them, a smug smile lingering on his lips as if he already knew how this would end. Finally, after what felt like an eternity filled with silence and tension hanging thick in the air, Jex shouted triumphantly, "An echo." Victor's expression shifted, surprise flickered across his features before being replaced by admiration. "Well done. You've answered correctly." The gang let out collective sighs of relief mixed with disbelief. They couldn't believe they had actually succeeded against such odds. "But," Victor added quickly while holding up a finger warningly, "this doesn't mean I'll let you go unscathed." "What do you mean?" Gruck asked nervously as dread began creeping back into their minds once more. "I think it's time for some lessons about respect," Victor declared ominously before raising both hands high above him again, this time summoning forth even more dazzling light that enveloped them entirely. As bright beams radiated outward like fireworks bursting into life around them, a sensation unlike anything else washed over each member of Gruck's gang. They realized they were about to learn just how formidable humanity could be when pushed too far. The hidden truth. As the blinding light enveloped Gruck and his gang, they felt a strange sensation wash over them, as if they were being pulled into another realm. The dazzling glow faded slowly, revealing the familiar interior of the quaint little house. However, something was different. The atmosphere felt charged, and a sense of unease hung in the air. Victor stood before them, his expression calm yet resolute. "You've made a grave mistake by entering my home," he said, his voice steady. "But instead of punishing you outright, I want to show you the truth about humanity." "What truth?" Gruck managed to croak out, still reeling from the earlier shock. He exchanged worried glances with his comrades, who were equally bewildered. Victor raised an eyebrow, as if amused by their ignorance. "You think you can waltz in here and take what doesn't belong to you? You have no idea what humans are capable of." With a flick of his wrist, he summoned a small holographic projection that floated above his palm. The image flickered to life, displaying scenes from history, battles fought against overwhelming odds, moments of bravery where humans stood against monstrous foes, and instances where their ingenuity turned the tide of war. The gangsters watched in awe as they witnessed humanity's resilience through time. Humans have faced countless challenges, Victor explained. From wars to natural disasters, they have always found a way to survive and thrive. He paused for a moment, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. And now, you've chosen to challenge that spirit. Gruck felt a knot tighten in his stomach as he realized the gravity of their situation. They had underestimated not just this man but all of humanity. We didn't know, he muttered weakly. Of course you didn't, Victor replied with a hint of sympathy in his voice. But now you will learn. He gestured again, and the holographic image shifted to show scenes from Victor's own life, his childhood filled with laughter and joy, followed by darker moments where he faced loss and hardship. I wasn't always like this, Victor continued. I was once an ordinary human like any other. But I learned that strength comes from within. His eyes glimmered with determination as he spoke about how he had honed his abilities through years of practice and perseverance. The gangsters listened intently as Victor recounted tales of overcoming obstacles that seemed insurmountable. They could feel their bravado slipping away as they began to understand the depth of human experience, the pain, joy, struggle, and triumph that shaped individuals into who they were. Now it's your turn, Victor said suddenly, snapping them back to reality. You will face your own challenges. With another wave of his hand, he conjured an ethereal portal that shimmered with colors beyond their comprehension. What is that? Lyra asked nervously, her eyes wide with fear. That is your path to understanding, Victor replied cryptically. You will enter and face trials that will test your resolve and character. Only then can you truly grasp what it means to be human. Gruck felt a surge of defiance rise within him despite the fear gnawing at his insides. We're not afraid, he shouted bravely, though his voice trembled slightly. Good, Victor said with a nod. Fear can be a powerful motivator. He motioned for them to step forward toward the portal. One by one, the gangsters hesitated before finally stepping into the shimmering light. As they crossed the threshold, they found themselves transported into an entirely different realm, a vast landscape filled with challenges that awaited them. A world of trials. The first thing they noticed was the stark contrast between their familiar forest surroundings and this new world, a barren wasteland stretched out before them under a brooding sky filled with dark clouds. The air crackled with energy as if something monumental was about to happen. What is this place? Zarn asked nervously as he glanced around at the desolate terrain. This is where you will learn, Victor's voice echoed around them despite him not being visible. Face your fears and confront your weaknesses. Suddenly, from behind a rocky outcrop emerged a massive creature, a towering beast covered in thick scales and sharp claws that glinted menacingly in the dim light. It roared loudly, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Run! Gruck yelled instinctively as panic set in among the gangsters. They turned on their heels and sprinted away from the terrifying creature that pursued them relentlessly. As they fled through the unforgiving landscape, Gruck couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of dread mixed with exhilaration. This was unlike anything they had ever experienced before. They had always relied on brute force to get what they wanted but now found themselves at the mercy of something far greater than themselves. Over there! Lyra shouted suddenly as she spotted an old abandoned building in the distance, a potential refuge from their pursuer. They dashed toward it with all their might just as the creature closed in behind them. Its hot breath could be felt on their backs as they pushed themselves harder than ever before. Finally reaching safety within its crumbling walls, they slammed the door shut just in time. Panting heavily from exhaustion and adrenaline coursing through their veins, the gangsters leaned against each other for support while trying to catch their breath. What do we do now? Jex gasped between breaths, fear evident in his eyes as he glanced toward Gruck who seemed deep in thought. We need a plan, Gruck replied firmly despite feeling shaken himself. This experience was unlike anything they had ever faced before. They couldn't simply rely on weapons or intimidation anymore, they had to think strategically if they wanted to survive. Suddenly, an idea struck him like lightning. We'll have to outsmart it. Gruck declared confidently, determination shining through despite their dire circumstances. They would use whatever resources available within this building to set traps for their monstrous foe. With newfound resolve, they began searching through debris scattered around them, finding old tools and materials left behind by previous inhabitants who had once called this place home. They worked together quickly, setting up makeshift defenses while keeping an ear out for any signs of movement outside. As time passed, the sound of heavy footsteps grew louder outside. The creature was still lurking nearby. But now, they felt more prepared than ever before. When it finally broke through the door, the gangsters stood ready, armed not just with weapons but also clever traps designed specifically for its size. And when it charged at them, they executed their plan flawlessly, using teamwork and ingenuity to turn the tables on their pursuer. In that moment, they realized something profound. They were capable of more than mere thievery. They could adapt and overcome challenges when working together. It wasn't just about stealing valuables anymore, it was about survival. As victory washed over them, the gangsters exchanged excited glances filled with newfound respect for one another. Perhaps this journey would teach them more than just lessons about humanity, it would teach them about themselves too. Victor watched from afar, his heart swelling with pride at how far these unlikely thieves had come already. Perhaps there was hope for redemption after all. The tables turned. As the gangsters caught their breath inside the crumbling building, they felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through their veins. They had just outsmarted a monstrous creature that had threatened their lives, and for the first time, they began to see themselves as more than just petty criminals. They were survivors. A new sense of purpose. "Did you see that?" Zarn exclaimed, his eyes wide with excitement. "We actually did it. We beat that thing." Gruck nodded, feeling a sense of pride swell within him. "Yeah, we did. Maybe we're not as useless as we thought." The realization that they could think on their feet and work together ignited a flicker of hope in their hearts. "Let's keep moving," Lyra suggested, glancing nervously at the door they had barricaded. "That creature won't be the only challenge we face here." With renewed determination, they set about exploring the old building. Dust motes danced in the air as they moved cautiously through the dimly lit rooms, each step echoing in the silence. They discovered remnants of a life once lived, faded photographs on the walls, broken furniture, and scattered belongings that told stories of those who had come before them. Facing their fears. As they ventured deeper into the building, they stumbled upon another room filled with strange artifacts. Some were familiar, a rusted sword, an old shield, but others were entirely alien to them. Each item seemed to pulse with energy, and Gruck felt drawn to a peculiar amulet hanging from a tattered cloth. "What do you think this is?" he asked, holding it up for the others to see. "I don't know," Jex replied cautiously. "But it looks powerful." Just then, a low growl echoed from outside the room. The gang froze, hearts pounding in their chests. They could feel something lurking just beyond the door, waiting for them to make a move. "We need to be ready," Gruck whispered urgently. "Whatever comes through that door, we can't let it catch us off guard." As if on cue, the door creaked open slowly, revealing another terrifying creature, this one even larger than the last. It had glowing red eyes and sharp fangs that glistened in the dim light. The gangsters instinctively raised their weapons but felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over them. "Stand your ground!" Gruck shouted, trying to muster courage despite his trembling hands. The power within. The creature charged at them with ferocious speed. In that moment of panic, Gruck remembered the amulet he had found. Without thinking, he hurled it toward the beast. To his astonishment, as soon as the amulet made contact with the creature's skin, it exploded in a burst of light. The blinding flash stunned everyone in the room, the gangsters and the creature alike. When the light faded, they found themselves in an entirely different place, a vast arena surrounded by towering cliffs and filled with strange creatures watching curiously from above. What just happened? Lyra exclaimed in disbelief. I think we've been transported, Jack said slowly as he looked around at their new surroundings. Victor's voice echoed through the arena. Welcome to your next trial. Here you will face not just physical challenges but mental ones as well. The gangsters exchanged nervous glances. This was unlike anything they had ever experienced before. They were no longer just thieves, they were participants in a game where their wits and strength would be tested against formidable foes. A test of wits. Suddenly, a massive stone door opened at one end of the arena, revealing an array of fearsome opponents. Monsters of all shapes and sizes emerged one by one. Each one more terrifying than the last. Gruck felt his heart race as he realized they would have to fight for their survival once again. Stick together, he shouted as they prepared for battle. The gangsters formed a loose circle, weapons raised high as they faced their opponents head-on. The first creature lunged at them, a hulking beast with razor-sharp claws and a roar that shook the very ground beneath them. But this time, they were ready. They worked together seamlessly, dodging attacks and striking back with precision. Each victory brought them closer together as a team. They learned to communicate without words, anticipating each other's moves and covering each other's backs. With every foe they defeated, their confidence grew stronger. Discovering strengths. After what felt like hours of relentless fighting, they finally stood victorious over their last opponent, a massive serpent-like creature that had nearly overwhelmed them with its size and strength. Panting heavily from exhaustion but filled with exhilaration, they shared triumphant smiles as they caught their breath. I can't believe we did it. Zarn exclaimed breathlessly. Gruck nodded vigorously. We're not just some low-level gang anymore. We're fighters. Just then, the arena began to shift around them. Walls melted away into beautiful landscapes filled with vibrant colors and strange creatures dancing joyfully around them. It was surreal, a stark contrast to everything they had just faced. Victor appeared before them once again, his expression proud yet serious. You have proven yourselves worthy in battle, he announced. But this is only the beginning. What do you mean? Lyra asked cautiously. There are more trials ahead, Victor replied cryptically. And you must continue to grow stronger if you wish to survive. Embracing change. As Victor's words sank in, they realized that this journey was not just about survival, it was about transformation. They were being given an opportunity to change, to evolve from mere criminals into something greater than themselves. With newfound resolve, they vowed to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. Together as a team, they would face whatever came next. As Victor gestured toward another shimmering portal, the gangsters stepped forward eagerly, ready to confront whatever awaited them on this incredible journey toward self-discovery and redemption. Lessons learned. As the shimmering portal closed behind them, the gangsters found themselves standing in a vast, open field. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over the landscape. It was a stark contrast to the dark and foreboding arena they had just left. The air felt fresh and invigorating, but there was an underlying tension that reminded them of their recent trials. A moment of reflection. Where are we now? Zarn asked, looking around in bewilderment. The tranquility of the field was disorienting after the chaos they had just experienced. I think it's a new trial, Gruck replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Victor said we would face challenges that would test us. As they began to walk through the field, they noticed strange symbols etched into the ground. Each symbol glowed faintly, pulsating with energy. Lyra bent down to examine one closely. What do you think these mean? She wondered aloud. Maybe they're clues, Jack suggested, his curiosity piqued. We should follow them. The gangsters moved cautiously, stepping from symbol to symbol as they ventured deeper into the field. With each step, they felt a strange connection to the land around them, a sense of purpose that had been missing before. The first challenge. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and a large stone pedestal rose from the earth. Atop it rested a beautifully crafted box adorned with intricate designs. Gruck approached it slowly, his heart racing with anticipation. "What do you think is inside?" he asked, glancing back at his comrades. "Only one way to find out," Lyra replied, her eyes sparkling with excitement. As Gruck reached for the box, a voice echoed across the field. "To open the box, you must answer this question: what is more valuable than gold but cannot be bought or sold?" The gangsters exchanged puzzled looks. "What kind of riddle is that?" Zarn muttered. "Think about it," Jex urged them. "It has to be something important." Gruck furrowed his brow in concentration. "It must be knowledge," he declared suddenly. The voice responded with approval. "Correct. Knowledge is indeed more valuable than gold." The box clicked open, revealing a glowing orb inside. The gift of knowledge. As Gruck lifted the orb from its resting place, a wave of energy surged through him. Visions flooded his mind, images of human history, their struggles and triumphs, their creativity and resilience. He could feel their pain and joy as if it were his own. "Do you see it?" Lyra gasped as she too experienced the visions. "This is incredible." The orb pulsed with light as it shared its knowledge with each member of the gang. They began to understand what it meant to be human, not just in terms of their physical existence but in their capacity for empathy, innovation, and collaboration. "We've been so focused on stealing and surviving," Gruck said thoughtfully as he set the orb back down on the pedestal. "But there's so much more to life than that." A change of heart. With newfound wisdom coursing through their veins, the gangsters felt a shift within themselves. They were no longer just criminals, they were individuals capable of growth and change. "We need to make things right," Zarn said firmly. "We can't go back to our old ways." "I agree," Jex added passionately. "We have this opportunity to become better, to use our skills for something meaningful." Gruck nodded in agreement. "Let's find Victor and show him how we've changed." With determination fueling their steps, they set off across the field toward a distant hill where they spotted Victor standing atop it, watching them with an approving smile. Confronting Victor. As they climbed the hill, Victor turned to face them fully. "I see you've discovered the value of knowledge," he said with a knowing look. "Yes," Gruck replied earnestly. "We understand now that there's more to life than just taking from others." Victor nodded appreciatively. "You've learned an important lesson, one that many never grasp." He gestured for them to sit beside him under a sprawling tree that provided shade from the sun's rays. "What happens next?" Lyra asked curiously as she settled onto the grass. "You will continue your journey," Victor explained. "But now you will do so with purpose, to help others rather than harm them." The gangsters listened intently as Victor shared stories of humans who had faced adversity and emerged stronger because of it, stories filled with hope and resilience that inspired them deeply. A new mission. As dusk began to settle over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Gruck stood up resolutely. "We want to help. We want to make a difference." Victor smiled warmly at their enthusiasm. "Then your journey truly begins here." With renewed purpose and determination, the gangsters set off into the unknown, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead while armed with knowledge and understanding that would guide their actions moving forward. They were no longer just thieves, they were agents of change, determined to prove that even those who had once walked down a dark path could find their way back into the light. And so began their quest, a journey filled with adventure, discovery, and redemption as they sought not only to redefine themselves but also to impact humanity positively in ways they had never imagined possible.